The guy was he was like a nuclear EOD guy. So like I said, responsible for transport and security for nuclear arsenal assigned to our base. So that's pretty creepy if you've got a shadow person he chases inside like a nuclear storage area. He was actually working in a nuclear storage area and he saw this shadow being.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Franc Milburn. We're going to continue our discussion on Kona Blue, particularly as it's going to get a lot weirder. So just be prepared, put your woo hats on. And the other strange thing about this stuff is real. Like, this is real. So this is an actual program that was proposed. So take it away, Frank.
Great. So this is an interesting slide because in 2009, blokes from BAS and from ORSAP, they went to see the Air Force Office of Special Investigations Special Projects. Okay, they're called AFOSI PJ for short. But this unit, they run counterintelligence and security for all the Air Force Special Access programs, as I'll explain. So they do the CI and security functions for the Special Access programs for the Air Force. One of the program managers at BAS had actually been an AFOSI officer, career officer. So he was able to get the BAS and ORSAP guys in to see AFOSI, and they said that it's not easy to get in to see them. So the reason that BAS, ORSAP went to see them is because they wanted to understand what AFOSI knew about UAP, and also to be able to eliminate knowns, as in, craft that were exotic technology, but US Air Force, from US Air Force Special Access Program specifically. And they also wanted to have AFOSI data on historical and current UAP events. And specifically, they wanted to know about the 1975 incursions into the Northern Tier nuclear bases, which have been quite well documented.
Yeah, you're talking Malmstrom Air Force Base incident as an example.
Yeah, and here I put AS, no, it should be BAS, needed to be read into some special access programs according to the AFOSI Special Projects Director. He said, yeah, sorry, but before we talk to you more, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace Studies and ORSAP, they need to be read into special access programs so that we can talk to you more. The Air Force guys did tell them that during the research and development of the F-117 and the B-2 bombers, that the AFOSI Special Projects, they maintained surveillance of UAP reports and UAP organizations that were producing those reports. So I thought that's very interesting because those were effectively that would be because the first flight of the F-117, I believe, was in 1977. So that would have been 1977 through the 80s and into the early 90s. So that's very, very interesting there.
And the reason they would do that is some people may have misidentified UAPs for a sighting of an F-117, for instance, right?
Yeah, that's true. And also they'd want to know if people had seen these exotic programs of the US Air Force Special Access programs. And by way of return, what the sort of BAS and ORSAP were offering, they were offering basically they'd be kind of like a sensor for AFOSI, so it'd be a two-way street. So they'd be able to report back to AFOSI if special access programs run by the US Air Force, if those craft had been seen by witnesses. So it would be like a two-way street. And AFOSI told them that some of these things that they'd seen reported from the 70s onwards, that some were US Air Force research and development craft from special access programs. And they also said, this is the Air Force said, that they could not identify a substantial number of UAP sightings. And this is directly from skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
So in other words, some of the time people were just reporting seeing some of these SAPs. And then other times AFOSI could not identify or could not track or explain what the UAP that was identified was, i.e. it was not U.S. military, right?
No, they were anonymous. Well, from what I understand here, they weren't U.S. Air Force research and development or special access programs. Whether they were Navy, we don't know. But it seems to me the AFSOI were looking at their own U.S. Air Force R&D special access programs. It doesn't specify if they're also looking at Navy ones, for example.
Yeah, fair.
So that's just
fair point.
That's a little unknown there. If you're looking at the experimental centers, a well-studied experimental location exists that's been researched for approximately 15 years, the primary location, so that's Skinwalker, right? And then they're talking about the experimental centers at DHS to have a catalog of geographical locations within the US, including the aquatic and space environments, right? So that goes back to like lunar, I guess, as well, and low Earth orbit, where advanced aerospace vehicle, AAV, so they're calling it here advanced aerospace vehicle, not anomalous aerospace vehicle, advanced aerospace vehicle, and related anomalous activity occur with a level of repeatability that merits consideration. Then they're talking about the biosensors, especially human, for observation and detection. Multiple biological samples will be collected from these locations, subjected to genetic, biochemical, toxicology, material science, and other analyses. So they're talking about biological samples, right? So not just UAP and nuts and bolts tech. And this is quite interesting. Past evidence of human psychophysiological observation, detection in all forms. And it said what might be labeled as integrative perception. And then using humans as biosensors. And then this is very interesting. And it says they want to know of some interest is whether individuals exposed to phenomena at site locations experience continuing effects as they relocate away from the sites under observation. So I think we're talking the hitchhiker effect there.
Yeah, hitchhiker effect. And they also modeled it like they would an epidemic. They did epidemiological studies of it, right? So apparently the R naught that they measured, which is the rate at which the infection spreads, is 3. And that's actually similar to the coronavirus, apparently.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, we'll actually get to that a bit more, but that's excellent that you pointed that out. And then again, they're talking about results obtained by other research groups or centers, foreign and domestic. So I guess they're talking maybe Five Eyes, certainly the ones they mentioned like Canada, Mexico, Brazil. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they're talking again, detailed logs, oral histories, or interviews of human observers engaging the advanced aerial vehicles. And then they're talking about identification of negotiation with present stakeholders for the type of information being developed. So governmental or privatized protocols for information sharing and access will be developed. And then, part of that will be sharing info for the medical center component, causes of medical injury resulting from near-field exposure to the advanced aerial vehicle phenomena. Sorry, advanced aerospace vehicle phenomena. Yeah, that's what AAV is what they're calling UAP.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, disruptive technology, exploitation and or threat nature of what's being observed, if in the hands of and under the control of a potential adversary, and assessment reports provided. So that's the counter-intel side there. Okay, now there's some really, really interesting little nuggets here.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
So they're talking remote vision, remote communication, and rematerialization techniques to observe, communicate, retrieve data, and transfer matter across dimensional and space-time barriers. Will undoubtedly
that's apportation. That's apportation, basically.
Teleportation, yeah. Transfer matter across dimensional and space-time barriers, and potentially time travel as well, right? Yeah. Transfer matter across dimensional and space-time barriers. Right, that's crazy. Will undoubtedly be of the utmost interest, if not a top collection priority for adversarial intelligence security services. Countermeasures will be a collection priority. Countermeasures against such techniques would be a collection priority, for the security intelligence side of the intel. And then this is where it gets mental. It says, recovered AAV technology exists and is accessible only within a special access program construct. Yeah. Okay. Then they go again, talking about the Advanced Tech Center, evaluation and exploitation of advanced technological hardware and associated documentation obtained to date. And then there's another kicker here. Retrieval and integration of historical data from high-value personnel with knowledge of recovered AAV technology and present location of recovered material is accessible only within a special access program construct. What do you think about that?
I mean, the thing that keeps coming up is only this technology is accessible. It's only accessible in a special access program construct. Otherwise, it's not. So it's highly, highly compartmentalized. And I would say about present location. Yeah, so we have these at sites, discrete sites that it's crazy stuff, man. It's crazy.
Now, if you look at these two paragraphs here, those look like they're lifted almost directly from the Reed letter. Undue attention by other United States government or private sector entities not involved with the program or any international interest will directly or indirectly interfere with the daily program mission and perhaps threaten the overall success of the program. That's what Reed was saying in his letter, right, in 2009. And then also, due to the highly specialized nature of the program, overt acknowledgement of personnel involved in the program will lead to unnecessary security risks.
We talked about that in the last episode, right? Where the reason Kirkpatrick is doing what he's doing, as abhorrent as it is, there's a reason for it. And if this information about these programs become a little bit more public, people are going to start asking questions. You ask enough questions, you're going to get down to direct personnel who've actually interacted with these AAVs, and that puts them at risk by our adversaries.
But he didn't have any problem naming the DHS personnel involved with Kona Blue.
Well, I think that those people are already public, right?
Yeah, like we said before.
And the fact that they're public means that they're not, they might be the outer circle of the inner party, but they're not in the inner party. The inner party is the ones who are very well connected to this stuff. So, and I think it's also to help just to discredit him because those people are coming for him, right?
Yeah. Okay, and then again, without appropriate SAP protection, blah, 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 compromise would result in grave consequences, perhaps irreversible to the security of the United States. Well, yeah, game over. If somebody else gets the 5 observables first, it's game over for the US, right?
Yep. Yeah, they will dominate the planet.
And her allies, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking a bit more about the centers. Again, this is the DHS centers. They're talking again, this is interesting, gain access to inventory, all existing cache of advanced aerospace vehicle materials and documentation within CONUS, whether residing in archive storage or under active program investigation in national laboratories, government organizations and or contractors. So we go back there to the email from Eric Davis talking about the DOE labs and the DOD labs, right? And then again, setting up protocols for obtaining access to materials newly acquired from sources both domestic and foreign, so they're US allies as well. Then the deliverables, inventory of AAV hardware, materials and documentation, stick it in a database. And then they're talking about, again, identification of and negotiation with present holders, stewards of AAV hardware, materials and documentation. So they haven't got there yet. Governmental or privatized, protocols for information sharing and access will be developed. And again, they're talking about the possible disruptive technologies in the hands of potential adversary. Okay, so they repeat that over and over. So I guess that's their selling point, because if you don't have a threat, i.e. adversary, then why are you doing this?
Right. They're creating a sense of urgency. Like this is an urgent, vital national interest.
Okay, so in-house staff, And then harness the talents of specialists with required expertise on as needed basis. Outsourcing of subcontracts, special interests is contact with military personnel and contractors presently or retirees previously involved in AAV evaluation programs. So what, are they talking about looking at all legacy programs like back to 1947 and potentially beyond? If there's anybody still alive, or there is paperwork, documentation, imagery, sensor analyses. Is that what they're talking about? I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then again, experts, relevant expertise, positional research papers. And this is very much echoing the DIRDs, including best guess extrapolation to potential future developments or directly by exposure to an examination of the materials or technological processes involved. Either could involve re-engagement of entities previously involved in earlier programs to assess such materials and technologies. So they're talking about legacy personnel and UAP programs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And entities, too. There might be companies that had contracts that they need to spin up again.
Gotcha. Again, they're talking about experts, relevant expertise.
Yep, same. It's like boilerplate, same words.
Yep, that's all the same.
Oral History Initiative. I jumped way ahead.
No, you go ahead, mate. Go ahead.
Oral History Initiative is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's more of a documentary. What's that?
Because Aro just made a mess of the last one.
I think that was intentional, though. I think that was... Yeah. But yeah, just getting these histories written down and tabulated just for the historical record, I think is extremely important. But in this field, people, they'll believe you in court, right? If you testify in court, they'll convict somebody on behalf of 3 people on what they say. But in this field, you can testify under oath before Congress and people will still say it's crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very, very, very good point. So let's go back up. Experts, relevant expertise, positional research papers, yes. Extrapolation to the future, we've seen that one. Explorers yet unidentified characteristics and functions of AAV materials and devices in the inventory and results reported. Studies of injuries, yes. And then here, this is very interesting. Enhanced investigations to pursue attempts by foreign countries, particularly China, Russia, in developing advanced technology breakthroughs from recovered technology items. Develop threat assessments based on this information. That's a very, very significant piece of information there.
Which is exactly why this stuff needs to be opened up, because if we keep this secret and we're just relying on these siloed programs to try to achieve a breakthrough, the Chinese and the Russians will beat us. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, I agree.
We need more minds on this problem, and we don't have enough minds on this problem. I mean, you could change an entire generation of America. My son, next year, he's going to start studying engineering at Stanford, right? It could change the entire trajectory of his life if he just knew whether or not this stuff was real. He might choose to study something that could help uncover or crack this problem, right? In terms of how to exploit these technologies faster than our adversaries. But right now, we're just wasting resources and time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I looked at that, didn't I, in my second paper for the Beck and Sadat Center, American Development of Aerospace Technology, a fait accompli, where Lou Elizondo is basically talking about bringing it under one roof so that if you have a stumbling block in one special access program, you can cross-fertilize with other special access programs. Rather than having a siloed approach, you bring all the special access programs on UAP under one roof so that you can make advances and get there before the Chinese and the Russians do.
Yeah, again, this should be like an Apollo program or a Manhattan Project.
Exactly.
Right?
But yeah, those are the words that he used, I believe, in that paper. So then we go on over past decades, and they say decades. Oh, sorry, go back. Over past decades, a number of high-level individuals in the military, intelligence, even political sectors of our government have had various levels of exposure access to this subject area. This included agency directors, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, very senior individuals in the executive branch. To this can be added certain foreign heads of state, select members of the government contractor community in the electronics and aerospace sectors, oral histories, from individuals of the caliber referenced above are crucial to this mission. And then again, the Oral History Project, gathering all information pertaining to the location of advanced aerospace technology and biological samples, including reports, files, reports, photographs, as well as physical samples. That's crazy, man.
Yeah, well, that's JCS, right? Joint Chiefs of Staff. We've had generals and admirals who've known about this stuff and just kept quiet, said nothing. That's amazing.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so they're talking about based on identification of possible advanced technological, including psychophysical processes being observed. So that's really very interesting.
Psychophysical. What the hell does that mean?
I guess that means maybe effects of
the brain.
Non-human entities, fear inducement. That time was it perception management or causing perceptual changes in the individual. I think those kind of things. That's what they're talking about, psychophysical. That's pretty crazy. Then again, the best guess extrapolation of potential future developments. Then again, oral history initiative again. And then again, so they keep on talking about this, identifying additional sources for information acquisition concerning possible experimental locations, whether it be individuals, groups, contractors, or government units and activities, foreign as well as domestic. Then they're talking about, the Consciousness Center, the acquisition, training, and utilization of remote viewers and communicators. Very, very interesting.
Let's stop right there. Everybody's familiar with remote viewing. Remote communicators? You're talking telepathy, man.
Well, potentially a remote viewer can appear maybe to another remote viewer and they can have a conversation in the ethereal plane, like outside of their physical body, maybe.
It could be OBEs, right? Tom Campbell, I interviewed Tom Campbell, who spent a lot of time with Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute, and they would do things like that. They would go on OBEs together. So maybe it utilizes that technique, or it could be something that has been entirely developed separately and is a current SAP program that just has never leaked. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to.
So, that's basically it, though, isn't it? I mean, an OBE, an out-of-body experience, is projection of the mental consciousness on the physical plane, but outside of the physical confines of your body, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Now, remote viewing, it's distinct from remote viewing, though, because you're not, I think in OBEs, you're projecting the entirety of your consciousness outward, whereas in remote viewing, you are projecting a portion of your consciousness, but you're still very much in your own body writing things down.
Okay. Here we go. Extend remote communication programs to communicate and retrieve data across dimensional space-time barrier.
What? What? Are they like sending messages into the past? Or speaking with people, like entities in the future? Like, what does that mean?
Develop remote viewing and remote communication countermeasures. So are they talking Russians and Chinese there doing remote viewing and remote communication, or are they talking non-human intelligences, or both?
Both, and they're also talking about housewives in the Midwest who were trying to remote view a meeting in Langley, Virginia at CIA headquarters, right?
Yeah. Gotcha.
All the above.
This is interesting. This is like human interface. Study consciousness interactions with and control of technology. So what you're talking like thought-activated weapon systems, activation of a UAP through consciousness. And this is mental. Conduct experiments to determine baseline parameters for physical transport across dimensional space-time barrier, as opposed to communication and data transfer.
Yeah, they're talking about teleportation, like moving people and things, as opposed to communicating and sending images and things like that.
Yeah, database. Okay, medical effects, physiological and medical effects of advanced aerospace vehicles, blah, blah, blah. This is interesting. Create rapid response team of in-house physician scientist personnel that can rapidly conduct MRI, 3 Tesla scans, blood tests.
What is a 3 Tesla scan? It's got something to do with magnetic resonance indicator, but I don't know what 3 Tesla. Oh, maybe that's the power of the magnetic field that they're using, That's probably what that means.
And they're talking hematology, toxicology, immune system genetic tests, tissue biopsies. That's important because the hitchhiker effect, people who suffered deleterious health effects from hitchhikers, from the hitchhiker effect, it affected their immune systems. So I think that's what they're talking about there. Oh, yeah, and here they go. They're talking about your non-ionizing EM radiation-associated injuries. Okay. And then the rapid response medical team described will also monitor and test family members in the aftermath of AAV interactions. So does that mean if someone's on a ranch or a location and they have an AAV interaction, that they'll examine the operative who's there and also at the same time examine the family?
Yeah, it's the
who's in another
effect.
location.
Yeah, it's probably the hitchhiker effect, and they're trying to see if there's some sort of. Again, I'm getting way into this, and I could be completely wrong for the physicists out there, but maybe there's some effect with quantum entanglement that they're trying to observe.
And here it seems to be, okay, they're talking very much about experiences here. An in-house PhD psychologist will conduct appropriate cognitive and other tests on individuals who have had experiences in any of the properties, on any of the properties described above, individuals who have had close encounter with AAVs, family members of either of those groups who have reported subsequent physiological medical effects. This is very interesting here. Create the internal infrastructure and personnel to handle, examine, and research unusual and unique biological specimens at the forensic, anatomic, physiological, biochemical, and genetic levels. So are we talking here biologics from craft, non-human intelligences, or are we talking as well cryptids and other tissue that maybe they find on places like Skinwalker?
Maybe they're the same thing.
Yeah, because I remember from the first book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, didn't they analyze tissue that they apparently shot off that wolf that tried to grab one of the calves?
Did they? I can't remember if they were able to do that or not.
Or maybe not that case, but when the Precog sentient phenomenon attacked that calf, I think they did forensic tests on that and sent it to a veterinary lab.
Yeah, for sure they did that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's fascinating. And then here we go. Create comprehensive database on physiological and medical effects of advanced aerospace vehicles in other countries. Okay, that's mental. And then they're talking threat analysis is based on medical findings, included but not limited to deaths and injuries as a result of interaction with advanced aerospace vehicles, medical injuries as a result of other anomalies. So we're talking orbs, cryptids, yeah?
And by the way, Frank,
yeah,
in addition to the US, Russia, China, and all the Five Eyes, there are other countries that have craft.
Oh, I believe
outside of this. Outside of those, I know of at least one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd imagine India would. Brazil, possible, almost certainly. Yeah, I mean, any country with advanced air defenses, with an advanced air force. Collateral injuries, physiological effects to family members. That's crazy as well. Then they're talking about the location, Las Vegas, blah blah blah. Property in Utah,
owned by Bigelow. You could just take out the blackout. Right.
Yeah. But they actually mentioned him later or earlier. Here we go. Yeah. So they mentioned the Bigelow Ranch here, Utah, the San Juan Valley in Colorado, and Marley's Woods in Missouri. Or do you say Missouri if you're American? Go Missouri.
No, only Southerners say that. Missouri is what I say.
Missouri. I say Missouri. I say Missouri.
I say Missouri.
Yeah. And that's fascinating again. Additional relevant classified material is believed to exist within other governmental special access programs and will be accessed for this effort. Yeah, well, good luck with that.
So
they talk about NIDS. And again, they're talking about Las Vegas, Classified Data Analysis Center. Okay. So those are the Bigelow facilities. Okay, I put this in because it came from Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I thought it was important. It's the 6-layer model for looking at the phenomena, right, by Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis. So it's talking about, perceptions as opposed to maybe the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very interesting, the anti-physical layer, the patterns that conflict with those predicted in modern physics. And then they talk about the psychic layer, the effects commonly found in parapsychology literature. So this is getting woo here, guys, right? It's getting woo. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I put this in. This is my slide. And I actually got the guy who'd been involved in ORSAP and ATIP to look at this one. And this is when he said, basically, you're bang on. So this would be the counterintelligence approach to phenomenon adversaries. Okay, this is standard counterintelligence, whether you're American or Brit or whatever. It's just like standard NATO counterintel. You identify the source of threat, identify the risks they present, develop countermeasures to mitigate the threat or the risks. You want to acquire, understand, and exploit the tech. And I put here the same for cryptids, understand and exploit. And then you want to protect the whole thing from adversaries and NHIs. I put in NHIs as well, non-human intelligences. And this was interesting because this comes up repeatedly at this point. Problem of assigning intent to NHI, threat to human health versus threat to humans. So they've got the capability, these craft, these orbs, these cryptids, to affect human health. But the team studying at BAS and ORSAP never seemed to be able to allocate intent to the NHI.
Yeah, it could just mean that there's a craft operating in the area and you just stumble upon it and you're going to get harmed with the non-ionizing radiation from the blue shift required to keep that thing stationary over the ground. And, you know, it's probably not their intent to harm you, but they did.
Okay, we'll keep that intent in mind. So there's interesting again, and I've written about this too. So there's this analysis of the Russian Thread 3 project, which was brought back by George Knapp from the former Soviet Union. So there's a Soviet military unit that's looking at UAP, okay? So there's a 149-page report that was produced by ORSAP that basically warned the Soviet Union, Russia was potentially ahead of the US, right? Potentially as far back as 30 years ago. 30 years ago from 2009, okay? So you can see why Harry Reid and co would be worried about other countries gaining an advantage over the US, you know, in this kind of exotic technological field, and why he first wanted to have the ORSAT program. And then this is quite an interesting point. So you'd wonder, you know, have the Russians made progress since, you know, in the past 30 years on UAP technology? Well, I'd say maybe not, because they wouldn't be bogged down in Ukraine with their land forces decimated. They'd actually be at the Channel ports now, if not in the UK. And China would be in Taiwan, but that's just my take. Mm-hmm. Any point you want to make on that, mate?
My view is they were probably ahead on certain aspects of the phenomenon. So I would think that on the psychical aspects of it, because I don't think the Russians had the same or have the same kind of giggle factor that Westerners do about psychic phenomena. So I would almost certainly believe they were well ahead in that area. Now, on the area of exploiting kind of the electronic aspects of the phenomena, I think we were way ahead, as given by the development of Silicon Valley and in the 1950s and all that stuff.
Stealth technology, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, stealth technology, Kevlar. So I think on the more technological aspects, we were probably a little bit further along. On the more psychical aspects, they probably beat us, but you can't really manifest a lot in the physical material realm using the psychical aspect, but you can do pretty good stuff with intelligence operations, right?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was on the Good Trouble show about a month ago or more. I gave a long spiel. I gave a presentation on Project Condign, which is the British intelligence report on UAP. They talk a lot about the Russian effort as well, but they were talking about it in 1999, 2000. So if anybody wants to check that out, it gives a little bit more information on it. So yeah, so I'm asking here, adversaries, are we talking Ivans, the Russians? Are we talking Chicom or contractors? Because there's this article from Vice where they're interviewing Dr. Gary Nolan. And he goes, we don't think this has anything to do with UAPs. We think that's some sort of state actor, and again, related to Havana syndrome. And he's talking about examining people at Skinwalker Ranch. So that's very, very interesting, I find.
Yeah, it's microwave weapons, right? Where you can fry somebody's brain. And these things have been around for a very long time, right? There's also speculation that they're scalar, some form of scalar weapon, which is where the EM wave and the magnetic wave kind of cancel each other out. Their cross product, the pointing vector, is equal to 0, but it still has tremendous energy. So it could be any number of things. It could be some sort of a sonic weapon. But I think when they also just recently learned that the people who were targeted were like the top 10%.
Yeah.
So people working on the Russian problem who were in the top 10% by performance in the DIA.
Yeah, they're going off the top talent.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, but like you said,
and then leads to other disturbing questions. How do they know who the top talent is? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, Bob McGuire said this openly. Dr. Bob McGuire on Twitter that he was in Moscow. He said that he saw all the antenna and the kit that the Russians had pointed at the American embassy, and the Russians didn't even try to hide it. Yeah. So, and I mean, going back to the 60s and the 70s, like the Moscow signal. Okay. So go to the next one. Yeah, this is something I looked at in my first paper. Yeah, was the Skinwalker Ranch. It seems to have some kind of portal. Colonel John Alexander has talked about this as well on the Skinwalker show. So the thing that I looked at in my first paper was, is it a Stargate portal for kind of, travel, or can it be used as a WMD weapon to fry people? And is that a source, or indirectly, because it's being used as a traversable wormhole portal, is this energy somehow being directed against people on the ranch and they're getting injured, as opposed to adversaries causing that kind of radiation damage?
Yeah, so this is exactly what we talked about with the anti-gravity blue shift, right? That's where your ionizing radiation comes. So in any craft, you would be compressing space-time in front of you and expanding space-time behind you. But as you're expanding space-time behind you, right, you're shooting off a lot of really nasty stuff like cosmic rays and things like that. So if you have a stationary craft, in order to stay stationary and counteract gravity, you have to expand the space-time beneath you, and nothing's happening above you. So anybody that walks within that field is going to get pounded with ionizing radiation. The other thing that's interesting about this particular signal is you have Casimir positive energy and Casimir negative energy. You know what the Casimir effect is, right?
No, mate,
it's when you have two plates and you position them in a certain way, you essentially tap the 0-point energy field, right?
Oh, okay.
So that's what that means. And they're saying then you have the metamaterial down here, which means that you have just some sort of material that by maybe flexing in real time, which is why Dr. Sarfati probably says you need advanced AI, because I think the thing needs to be constantly warping and shifting its shape in order to experience this anti-gravity effect. And a human's not going to be able to do that in nanoseconds in real time.
Right, so you're going to have it constantly adjusted by kind of autonomous AI, constantly adjusting the metamaterials to control the gravity.
Sarfati never said that. I'm just speculating. That's like my speculation. Okay. But I think that's what it might be. But maybe it's the same thing. That the portal, the Casimir energy provides, is just the energy source, which is, you have access to a ridiculous amount of energy that we currently do not have. Anyway, again, all speculation. It sounds intelligent. A physicist might sit here and listen to me and be like, this guy is that's complete pseudoscience coming out of the guy's mouth.
No, I think you sound pretty squared away to me, mate.
Well, we'll find out. Anyway, we're all trying to figure this stuff out, man. So
yeah. So electromagnetic effects. I actually lifted this one because Brandon Fugel just issued a few slides on Twitter where he was talking about where they briefed the congressional committee what was going on at Skinwalker. So you've got like the effects on electronic equipment from GPS, drones, computers, and phones. Incidentally, I was doing protective security in Libya. I was south of Benghazi, the deepest desert, and there was some kind of op going on. This is like 2011. There's some kind of operation going on because I had two GPS. I had my main and my backup, and I kept on looking at my paper map that I also had. And for a period of about 3 hours, my paper map was telling me, I'm going along this road, but the GPS were telling me that I was like 10 kilometers to the west. So there's obviously something going on, some kind of GPS manipulation.
Well, that's spoofing, right? That technology exists. I mean, that could easily be conventional. It could also be a GPS jammer. So we actually looked at using that against U.S. forces when we were training them.
Yeah.
And we were denied. And this is way back. This is 20 years ago, right? 2 decades ago. You could buy off-the-shelf GPS jammers. And we were denied because it would impact planes flying over the base, which, is bad. Like commercial airliners and stuff, not good.
Yeah, you wouldn't want a plane piling in just so that Sean can have his red victory.
Exactly. Plus, I didn't need to jam the GPS to have a red victory every time. So,
all right, mate. Okay, so getting weirder, and based on the previous kind of counterintelligence sort of process that we looked at for assessing kind of adversaries, the sources of threat, and also the risks they present. I took this from my first paper. Colonel John Alexander, he talks about the Precog sentient phenomena, skinwalker. Mm-hmm. So he's talking about it being around for decades, possibly centuries. He talks about a day like cattle mutilation. So he says the best solution could be, an invisible UFO or interdimensional interaction, and both exceed our understanding. And he goes, this is a case in which Precog sentient phenomena proved to be completely in charge and absolutely malicious. So from a sort of counterintelligence and security perspective, okay, there hasn't been an attack on a human, but if you can do that to a cow, you can do that to a human. And one could almost say, well, could you assign intent to the NHI involved? Was it some kind of like demonstration, doing it in broad daylight to basically scare the shit out of people?
Probably.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
It's just like turning our nuclear weapons off, or in the case of the Soviets, turning them on. I mean, you want to talk about something that would scare the shit out of you. All of a sudden, you see nuclear missile lights come on. You're like, whoa.
Exactly. Or like Bob Salas, you're sitting in your capsule underground, and you've got your crew chief who's in charge of the security forces. He told me that there was one bloke who got so shit scared by the UAP that they saw over the area, over the launch facility, that the guy cut himself up really badly trying to scale the perimeter fence, trying to get away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the characteristics, precognitive, seems to know stuff before we do as humans, seems to be able to anticipate human reactions, highly intelligent, invisible, malicious, as per the mutilation or mutilations. Potentially, as we've seen at Skinwalker as well, mind control or possession, certainly the ability to instill great fear, as we just talked about. The poltergeist activity, moving heavy objects as well, not just cows, but if you look at the first Skinwalker book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, the rancher comes out, he had some kind of machine for like a pile driver for driving in stakes for his perimeter fence into the ground. And he couldn't find this pile driver anywhere. Then he looked up in a tree, this big tree, and the pile driver's like up on the top of the tree. So how did that get up there?
Well, how much do you think the thing weighed? It wasn't like you couldn't throw it up there, right? It had.
It's something that you'd have to tow with your 4x4, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Destruction of equipment. So there's that famous case where they've got one camera looking at another camera on a pole, and then they come back and basically the film's still going and they don't actually see anything on the film, but like the camera's been kind of destroyed and all the wiring's been like ripped out of the pole and on the ground. UAP or interdimensional interaction, certainly as per the Colonel's observations, and seemingly invulnerable because we don't have a countermeasure against it. It seems to be able to act as well. I mean, we can't do anything about it, we as humans. And then I put here, you'd be looking at it from a counterintelligence perspective and a DIA perspective, certainly as ORSAT was, the threat risk implications, but also the weaponization potential of it. If you could somehow understand it and harness it, obviously first you'd want to have the countermeasures against it, but, you'd be thinking, well, those capabilities could do very well for us if we could control it. Dangerous NHI, Final Events, which is actually a really great book by Nick Redfern.
I've read it. It's very creepy. It's very creepy.
It is really, really creepy, yeah. So hang on, just let me minimize this. So he talks about these scientists who were involved with this program, and they had like these victims. They don't know whether they were like prisoners or what, but one of them was killed by like what looked like a remotely induced cardiac arrest. Another one that looked like being killed by a remotely transmitted head trauma that resulted in crushing a part of the skull, and another one by, remotely controlled suffocation. So, I mean, that's really, really creepy. I mean, as we said before, if you could do that to a cow, then why couldn't you do that to a human? I'd personally be very disturbed by that. Okay, this was a very interesting article, actually, that came out from Liberation Times. It was this Indian analyst, and he's talking about what would happen if UFOs appear over like a Pakistani missile site, that potentially overly religious people, they'd start thinking that it was some kind of jinn or black magic, and that would cause all kind of problems, up to and including maybe like a mutiny against their own officers. And that actually brings me back to the story that we just told about that Air Force security guy at Bob Salas launch facility. When he got so scared, he tried to climb the perimeter fence and get away. So that's quite an interesting one there. And this would have, very interesting applications for both domestic and foreign adversaries if they have like overly religious beliefs. Because it would undermine their belief system. If you believe, like, say, overtly in God, you think like it's some kind of devil, you believe, God's not on your side, it's not protecting you. And also, like a psyops weapon that you could use against, like, Iranians, terrorists, etc. Military forces.
Well, didn't the British actually do something? Oh, I'm reading about the Sepoy mutiny.
Yeah.
Didn't the British actually do something like that where they dipped their bullets in pig's blood to suppress like a revolt in the Sudan, kind of in the 1870s or 80s, something like that?
I don't know, but that would have been pretty evil of the Brits to do.
It's a psychological weapon. I can understand using that.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Indian mutiny, that was actually like a false rumor that was spread, basically so that people would mutiny against the Brits because it would upset both Muslims and Hindus. But that's what caused the revolt to kick off.
Isn't that what they call a mimetic virus?
I don't know, mate. What do you mean by that?
So there was a slide that Colonel Nell put up on kind of the pros and cons of disclosure.
Okay.
And I think one of the cons was mimetic viruses.
Right.
Right. Where you learn of this thing, but things spread. So let's say, I'm just going to make something up on the spot. So let's say there's disclosure. We learn that some humans have been hybridized, and these are the people who have reported abductions, so to speak.
Right.
And let's say a mimetic virus spreads that they're basically an NHI fifth column, and they're here to kill us all. So, and you can see where that goes, but it spreads like a virus, and likely innocent people get harmed because of some rumor that spreads that has far-reaching and irreversible consequences.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for the complete detour.
That's fascinating, mate. Then going to cryptids. So here we've got a sort of depiction of a skinwalker, a Wendigo, and I think the commonality between them is some kind of like human transformation, some kind of, metaphysical transformation. And there seems to be something that's certainly with regards to the environs of a Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin. It's something that's a firmly held belief by indigenous inhabitants.
Right.
Yeah, to the extent that they don't want to talk about the Skinwalker because they don't want to attract it. So these are kind of like mythological creatures. But you can also see, in European terms, this could be like a werewolf, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's something that's been in the human kind of fear space of your head for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Well, you take dogmen phenomena. I think there's a place in the UK that has an inordinate number of sightings of dogmen. But that, if you talk to, are you familiar with Steve Mera?
I've heard the name, mate, but I'm not familiar with his work, no.
So he studied this stuff extensively. But the dogmen phenomena traces all the way back to Sumerian and Babylonian demonology. So it's all like all this stuff stretches across multiple cultures and societies. Now, are they just scary bedtime stories? It's possible. But is there something to it? Probably. So, hopefully there'll be some level of disclosure so we learn more about the true nature of our reality and how much more expansive it is, and also richer and scarier, but also areas for more opportunity and expansion of human consciousness.
Absolutely. So I did a profile on the cryptids based on what I'd read from the first two Skinwalker books. So definitely sentience and high intelligence. There's the invulnerability to high velocity, large caliber rounds, like you shoot at it and it doesn't seem that bothered. Bits drop off, but it just kind of like leaves, but at its own pace, doesn't seem worried at all. A possibility to regenerate tissue limbs. Does this indicate a live entity? And certainly this is something that would be interesting to any military if you could kind of harness that DNA to help soldiers regenerate after combat injury, for example. Invisibility, they don't leave tracks. That would be something that would be very, very interesting from a military perspective. Potentially temporal spatial displacement at will, ruthless and fearless. So again, the fear inducement, the psychological operations aspect, shapeshifter ability, so animal environmental senses, and also, the kind of extraordinary strength and resilience that comes from animals. And I just put here, this is just off the top of my head, ideal for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, infiltrations, assassinations, exfiltration of high-value targets. If you wanted to do like a deep infill for rescue and recovery, for example, of pilots or something like that. It's just ideas off the top of my head. Then there's the ability to pass through solid objects. So there's this one case where they find these tracks, and it appears basically that like this entity, whatever it was, has passed straight through the fence with no evidence of climbing it or anything. It's just gone through the fence. So that the potential to go through solid objects. Vulnerabilities, potentially susceptible to certain weapon systems. If it's sentient living, then does it have like a self-preservation imperative, as all living things do, or most living things do? I'd say likely fears exposure and human exploitation, otherwise it would be out in the open. Most likely wouldn't like to be captured and exploited. Then I look at, what kind of reproduction it has, lifespan. Is it clandestine or is it integrated into human society, i.e. living partly as a cryptid and living partly as a human? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Peter Horsley, right?
I'm not actually, no, mate, no.
So I think he's someone who worked for the British royal family.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So Peter Horsley, yeah, exactly. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, say more, because I know very little about him. I just know that he's had...
Air Vice Marshal, yeah.
He reported an experience where he interacted with a NHI that appeared to be perfectly human.
Mr. Janus.
Yes, say more. You know more about this than I do.
Yeah, but I mean, that guy, or the person he interacted with, Mr. Janus. Janus is the Roman two-headed god. So it's got like
two-faced, right?
Yeah, two-faced
looking
god,
forward and backward. January, beginning of a new year. Janus, yeah.
Okay, so this is very interesting as we're going into. Hang on, sorry, just go back. So there was this guy, Adrian Reister, stationed at Whitman Air Force Base. So he saw orbs and he saw a shadow person that managed to get.
You know what else was stationed at Whitman Air Force Base at that time?
Okay, who else?
Well, not what. I think a huge portion of the B-2 bomber fleet.
Yeah. He actually says, there's B-2s, F-117s. The guy was he was like a nuclear EOD guy. So like I said, responsible for transport and security for nuclear arsenal assigned to our base. So that's pretty creepy if you've got a shadow person that he chases inside like a nuclear storage area. He was actually working in a nuclear storage area and he saw this shadow being. And this is what he purportedly saw. And he didn't find it. And it was like, a place where there's only like one way in and one way out.
It's like in Predator, right? Like that camouflage, right?
Well, he said it wasn't electro-optical. It was more like a black mass. It wasn't like electro-optical or kind of like shimmering. Like literally what it says, a shadow being. And so I asked, is this like a non-human entity or is it a remote viewer in a highly sensitive nuclear facility?
And what did he say?
Well, no, I didn't ask him, but I'm asking myself, like, what is this? Is this some kind of NHE? Is it some kind of like non-human intelligence? Or is
I think it would be like non-human. I think it'd be a non-human intelligence. I don't think you would see remote viewers, right? Because you're not physically there as a remote viewer. You're just projecting your consciousness, right?
Yeah, but I've talked to people who said that they've seen remote viewers.
Huh.
So I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Like physically through their own like actual perception.
Physically they see like an outline of what they knew was a human in the room looking at them, and then they immediately thought it's a remote viewer.
Oh, so it would be somebody doing an OBE.
Exactly. But in this case,
Yeah.
I don't know, because it's in the shape of a person, whereas the people that I spoke to said that it was definitely a person, and they immediately thought remote viewer. So I don't know. I just threw that out there, mate. And now gets really weird. Now, this is a great article by George Knapp from November 11, 2021. I actually posted it on Twitter, I think yesterday. So it's talking about Air Force security guys who are protecting Area 2, where they've got nuke munitions. And there's some absolutely crazy stories that they have. Giant UFOs over weapon storage areas, shadow entities, a shape-shifting UFO from the 1980s, some kind of hybrid catman that was living in an enclosure that these contractors had built, and it used to get like fed meat. This is a story from the video, right? I don't know. But this Air Force security guy is talking about it and saying there was some kind of like hybrid, genetically real being. It was basically a cross between a man and a cat, right? So I don't know what you make of it. Yeah. And they were they were feeding it animals to assess like its hunting potential. And then eventually the thing escaped. But there's two guys who give this interview, separate interviews, and they say that this catman, that US Air Force security personnel were seeing this catman, shadow entities, and UFOs like all over the place. Right, in Area 2 of Area 51. But that's really
Bentwaters, right? The Bentwaters incident in the UK. Those UFOs showed up, or that craft, etc.
Yeah.
But at the time, the U.S. had nuclear weapons at that base. They didn't tell the British about it, apparently. And I'm sure somebody in the British military knew, but most British officials had no idea it was there. So it's almost like anywhere these things appear. I mean, that's what's kind of crazy, right? You could use it for your own intelligence by just watching where these things appear in China, right? Or in Russia, because that might be an indicator, if you correlate it against the data, that that's the site of a potential nuclear weapons storage or facility, right?
That's a very good point. And then you back it up with imagery analysis from satellites, for example.
Right. I mean, again, you can't use one source, right? You have to use all source intelligence. Just like you don't go on the view of one remote viewer, you use many remote viewers. You also cross-pollinate it with image intelligence, human intelligence, satellite intelligence, MASINT, SIGINT, all that stuff.
Exactly, yeah, all source intelligence. Anyway, I'd recommend everybody have a look at this article because it's absolutely mental. It blew my mind when I watched it. I was just like, oh my God. Okay, so two separate incidents. We've got this Reitner guy, the US Air Force guy. He's talking about orbs in the vicinity of nuclear storage area. Okay. And then this is from Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. It's talking about this blue orb that travels through this guy at chest level. And after that, he has some horrible, deleterious illness from it, including immunodeficiency problems.
Yeah, like he got cancer too, right?
Oh, yeah. That's right. And then this is quite a crazy one. Again, blue orbs. There's a chapter in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. I think it's called Blue Orbs Are Dangerous, something like that. So these three dogs get zapped. So the rancher finds them, and it goes, there's three black greasy lumps in the middle of each circle. The rancher presumed that his dogs have been incinerated. The dogs were never seen again. So
if
an orb can do that to dogs, it can do it to humans, right?
100%.
So I did an assessment on the orbs. Is it a technological device? Definitely capable of inducing fear, can kill animals and humans. Ability to pass through tissue. Ability to pass through solid objects, because we've heard about orbs passing through buildings. Cause serious illnesses. And again, if you could weaponize that, it would be very interesting to certain military and intelligence quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets interesting. You're talking about the infectious agent model. You've got Travis Taylor going, we didn't like talking about the hitchhiker because everybody's afraid it's going to trigger something. Just like the indigenous inhabitants of the Uinta Basin around Skinwalker. They didn't want to talk about it. And then the fact that they're talking, that they're measuring events happening 1,000 miles apart.
This is what we were talking about with the R0, right, of 3, the infectious
Exactly.
model.
Exactly. And then it says, like, most people who spent more than a day on Skinwalker brought something home with them. Let's talk about Kelleher and Eric Davis. Their wives would wake up at night seeing people or black shadows. And then this escalated with the ORSAT BAS program. And then you had this intelligence agent personnel visit the ranch. And then their families were seeing dogmen in the backyard and orbs flying around, black shadow people standing over their beds, and loud footsteps walking up and down the stairs, which is basically like poltergeist activity, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. And then here we go. So a lot of people who came back, so they also began to experience autoimmune diseases in one or more family or household members. And this is a quote from Bigelow. We didn't know that it was going to stay with you for maybe years and years, the rest of your life. And then, Colm Kelleher talks about an infectious disease model. The symptoms of the infection comprised of poltergeist and other paranormal events in the immediate environment of the newly infected individual. Again, you've got the threat risk implications, but also the weaponization potential if you could harness that. And I'm not sure that you could, but somebody would be interested in looking at that from that perspective.
Oh, you could absolutely weaponize it. You could absolutely weaponize it.
Yeah, but maybe you get blowback on you.
It depends. It depends. Once you understand how the mechanism works, right?
Yeah, but I was thinking
I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying somebody sufficiently unscrupulous might be able to do it.
Yeah, but it might be like using like a bioweapon or a chem weapon. Like, it all sounds great and use it, but what happens if the wind blows the wrong way, right? Then your own people get in trouble. Now, another area that would be interesting from the phenomena point of view is actually understanding kind of missing people and abduction phenomena. And Paulides has produced like these amazing films and books. And the last one is absolutely fantastic, the UFO Connection, Missing 411. So he posits he's gone through this evolution of people disappearing in national forests and state forests and in really, really weird circumstances. And then in a sort of final documentary, he posits a UFO connection, which I find very interesting. And he's actually, if you look at his work and you watch him on YouTube, he's more and more into the idea, understanding what's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, because he sees it very much in the same vein as what he's been documenting for years. So understanding the phenomena at like Skinwalker Ranch, at the San Juan Valley, and the Morsley Woods, if you could understand those, it might give us a better idea about abduction phenomena as well. That's just my own kind of take on that. Then a quote from George Knapp. Yeah, people think they're ready for disclosure, but then, the idea of invisible beings, they're around us all the time, they can watch us, manipulate physical realities, vaporize our dogs, kill our animals. I'm not sure people are ready to deal with that as a reality from their government. So I think that's quite a pertinent one.
I'd rather know. I'd rather know, because your government's not protecting you if these things exist and they're not letting you know about it, right? By definition, they're not protecting you by leaving you in ignorance.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my viewpoint. When it causes panic, maybe, but you just need to be cautious about how you drip this thing out. And I think that's kind of what they're probably doing, right? They're not putting it all out at once. They're just slowly, okay, they're a craft, then Grush comes out, we may have recovered these craft, but right now we're focused solely on the nuts and bolts physical phenomena part.
Yeah.
And then I think once people kind of get used to the fact that these things are real, then they'll start dripping out some of this other stuff without. Yeah, remote viewing's been out for 20 years. Yeah. Right? Or probably longer than that, 30 years.
Yeah.
And people still, I didn't even know it existed until 2018 when I read Dave Morehouse's book, Psychic Warrior. I had no idea.
I read that book. I read that book back in the early 90s.
Yeah, well, I had no idea until I read it. And if I had known that was an opportunity, I probably wouldn't have left the military as early as I had.
Oh, you would have stayed in to be a remote viewer like that?
I would absolutely. If I knew that was a possibility and I knew I could get it, I would have stayed in. I'll give you an example. I did armor my entire time, but I was assessed as a military intelligence officer. But what they do in the United States military is they send you for some subset of military intelligence officers, because they don't need a lot of lieutenants, they'll put you on something called branch detail, where they'll send you to a combat arms branch for 4 years. So I did armor, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I really like doing this. And then I look at the only mental model I had for what military intelligence did was an S2. And I'm like, why the fuck would I want to do that? Like, I have no interest in doing that at all. And I didn't realize that you could do all this other stuff. I probably would have stayed in, but that's the problem. That's why, like, keeping this stuff so secret and, not providing a little bit more understanding about the nature of reality. Like, the military wasted a resource. Like, I could have been a resource doing some of this stuff, but I didn't know it existed. So I bounced. I went to graduate school and did what I was going to do. So again, they're harming themselves by not allowing them to have access to more talent. Right?
Yeah, you probably did it right for yourself, mate, didn't you? You didn't
What's
do
that?
Too badly, Sean. You didn't do too badly, my boy, Sean.
Well, I know. That's the point, right? Like, I looked at what I could do staying in and what I could do getting out, and, I didn't have this data set. So I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be a butt boy S2 getting beat up by the colonel, right? Yeah. Because I was right about what the enemy was going to do, and I kicked their ass, right? It's not a fun or interesting job. Like, I didn't want to do that. Anyway, I would have loved this study. I mean, that's why I'm studying this stuff now, right? And I don't have the constraints that you would in the military to looking at it, right? I could say whatever I want as long as I wasn't given to it under classified circumstances.
Exactly.
Right? If it's real, I could say whatever the hell I want, and nobody can stop me. So, yeah, I don't know if aliens are visiting us from some other planet. I think my view is they're coming from some other where.
Yeah, when or where or when and
yeah,
where.
when. Yeah, when could be. Yeah, I mean, it could be from some other planet, but they might not have crossed the gulf of empty space. It might be that they came through a wormhole, right? It could be they're living in the oceans.
From a parallel universe, or they're already here living in the oceans, or deep underground, or all the above.
They could be 3-dimensional avatars of a 7-dimensional being, right?
Right.
I don't know. Right?
I don't know either.
They could be holograms. Holographic projections. I don't know. So
I don't know either, mate.
All right, brother. Anything or any final words for the audience?
No, I just want to say thanks very much, Sean. That was another great one. And thanks for bearing with me. For those who are watching, I kept Sean waiting a long time for this one. And I hope he didn't lose patience with me, but I think the end result was worth it.
No, I have all my videos done out to the end of May, so we're starting to populate June, but I might make this one come sooner because of the timing, right? But I still have to edit it first. Anyway, thank you very much, brother. It's always good to see you, and hopefully we'll meet in person at some point. Next time you're in the States, or if I ever end up
States. Yeah,
or on your side of the pond. Yeah,
I'll come and see you.
Yeah, I'll reach out. I might. Well, we'll talk afterwards. All right. Thank you, my friend. Talk soon.
Bye, brother.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site. which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you could get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's two options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.